You are watching an episode in our Landlording A-Z series, where we walk you through the steps, skills, and challenges involved with residential rental real estate investing. We share our expert advice, including the tips, tricks, and strategies we've learned over years of managing rental property. Please subscribe to our channel to get notified each time a new episode comes out, and please like and share our content with people you know who might be interested. Thanks for watching.
Hello, you have Chris and Eli here. That's Chris, I'm Eli. We're Landlord Gurus, and this is episode 6 of our Landlording A-Z series, where we take you step by step from purchasing a property through getting it rented and each step of management. So today we are talking about setting the rental terms. So you have your property, you've got it ready, and in our last episode, we talked about setting the criteria for who you'll be accepting as your tenants, what you want them to measure up to. And here you're going to take a close look at your property and your needs and decide what each of the terms are that you're going to put in your advertisement to let people know what you're going to be asking of them. So Chris is going to start us off with some of the common rental terms that go into a listing and then into an agreement. So
yeah, exactly. And like you just mentioned, these are terms that you're going to have in your advertising, but then they will also carry through into your lease as well. So definitely something to take the time up front and consider what you want to do, what you're looking for. So the first thing we're going to start with is the actual term of the lease. Do you want, commonly it's a 1-year lease, but is that, does that work for you? Is that what you're going to need? Or are you going to look for something shorter? Like, are you offering student housing or kind of this medium term housing to corporate housing or traveling nurses and things like that? Or are you going to even go month to month? So, you're going to have to juggle those, what works best for you. Also think about, does the tenancy end at the end of the term? Like if it's a 1-year lease at the end of the year, is it over, or does it automatically revert to month? So those are things that you'll need to decide, and they'll go in your lease as well. And there's pros and cons to all of that. So just kind of, depending on the timing and when, you think a good time the lease might need to end so that it's a good time to advertise for the next tenant. If that summer is a good time to start a new term, maybe you have it end at the beginning of the summer, something like that. So just things to consider. Next is animals. Are you going to accept pets in your property? And if so, what kind and how many? So for example, some of my properties, we allow cats, but we don't allow dogs. We've talked about, the pros and cons of having pets in your rentals. It opens up the tenant pool, but there's some costs and there's some potential consequences to that as well. So we'll post links to all the content that we've talked about this before. But if you do allow pets, careful not to lump service animals and emotional support animals into your pet policy. They're not considered pets.
Not pets.
Yeah, there are some strict rules about what you can ask, what you can do, and what you cannot do when people have service animals or emotional support animals. And again, we'll post links to that content as well. If you do allow pets, consider all the different types of pet fees, things that you might need to ask for. For example, are you going to charge the applicant for pet screening if they have a pet? That's a relatively new service that there's companies out there that offer that will screen animals, and you can check their histories and things like that. So, usually there's a fee that's going to be passed on to the applicant. Think about your pet deposit. By allowing pets, like we mentioned, there may be some wear and tear or some damages that come to the property. So consider what that pet deposit is going to be, to cover any potential damages. Pet fees, and or pet rent. So, are you going to charge a flat fee, whatever that is, $100, $200 for having a pet, or is it going to be an actual rent every month? You're going to charge an extra $50 per pet. So think about that, see if you can, see what's going on in the market and see what sort of is accepted and what the standard is in your area. You're going to want to have that decided before you go about marketing your property.
Yep. And going into that too, you may want to set some guidelines on what size, and like Chris said, what types of pets. I do smaller dogs, generally under about 40 pounds.
Yep.
So, okay. So the most important probably is setting price. So you want it to rent and have that balance between renting quickly, not sitting vacant, but also getting kind of the highest value you can out of it. So you can do pretty quick and quite valuable surveys of Craigslist listings or Zillow or PadMapper or any of these other listing sites. Search your area with parameters that match your property and see what all is out there. Notice where you have strengths or weaknesses in location or finishes, and just take in enough so that you get kind of a sense for where you fall in there. A lot of the property management software products out there now also have a free calculator, essentially, that estimates what your rent for a property ought to be by pulling in listings and making some calculations, some averages based on size and what's around you. And you can also use products such as Rentcast, which is a more sophisticated service. It costs a little bit of money, but it'll give you a report with comparables and trend lines for what local rents have been doing and at different unit sizes, and give you high, medium, and low ranges and that type of thing. So for a couple bucks, that could be a pretty useful tool too. And I guess it's an important aspect of setting up your rental.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to also want to consider utilities and how you handle utilities, how you and your tenant handle them. So things like electricity, water, garbage, gas, oil, etc., things like that. A lot of times, you might, as the landlord, just pay for those utilities. But we believe that if you can incentivize the tenant to, if you pay for the rent and you pay for the utilities, and they may just use whatever they want, right, and not even think about that. So not only is that not good for the planet, it's not good for your pocketbook. Think about what utilities can be put directly in the tenants' names, if possible. Generally, if you can meter them separately so that they're paying for what they use, and if they don't like the cost of the electricity usage, they can do something about that themselves. But to have units metered separately, it can be expensive, so there's trade-offs. If you can't meter utilities separately, there are multiple ways that you can charge your tenants for utility costs. One is called ratio utility billing system, or RUBS. And that's where you would charge tenants for actual utility expenditures, or close to actual utility. It's basically calculated based on the square footage and the occupancy of each individual unit. And so you would charge a ratio of that unit to the overall costs for the entire
That's retroactive. So you get the bill, and you have your calculation for this unit's 42%, this is 15, and the amount of that bill, the tenants in each of those get billed for the proportion of whatever that bill was.
Exactly. So it might not be exact to each particular unit, but it's close-ish.
Right. And it's agreed upon in the lease.
Exactly.
It's clear what they're signing up for.
Exactly. And it's an easy way to do it, and that ratio never really changes.
Right.
So, and then again, like we talked about, sub-meters, you can install sub-meters for each utility on each unit, but that can be expensive, and you're gonna have to check with your utility. They may not even allow that. So,
but Chris, there's a difference between separately metered, which would be by the utility, like
that's true.
that utility electrical meter, versus a sub meter, which is actually an aftermarket item that you can have an electrician put in that will read, what's going to, hopefully you can tap into the feed that goes to this unit, and then what that one's using. So anyway,
exactly. True. And that way you can measure exactly what they're using, and you can charge them for that specific use.
Right.
But yes, there is going to be a cost to that, where you're going to have to get that installed on each line individually
and manage it every month.
Yep, exactly.
The billing. Yeah.
Or you can do a flat fee, where you might charge, a set amount per person per month for water and for sewage and for garbage. Maybe that's $40 per person per month, or whatever it is, depending on the rates that you are currently paying.
Yeah, it's an easy way to do it. But fortunately, most of my units are separately metered for electricity and gas, if any, and then water, sewer, garbage. I just use this flat fee, and it's essentially it just gets added to rent, and there's no calculation going on.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so you'll notice that we didn't include phone or cable or any of that in the utilities. Those are, elective, especially given that now everything, we can do pretty much everything cellular. But you want to decide whether or not, or consider offering Wi-Fi. Sometimes it's affordable enough to offer it for a building that it's worth than the bump in appeal that you get for having that included. And the other potential benefit of that is, I have security cameras at one of the buildings now, and I put a Wi-Fi system in there so that I could have monitoring on that.
Right.
So that's, there are a couple variables to weigh, on balance, it might be worth doing that.
So in that case, if you're bringing Wi-Fi into the building already, then you might just want to consider offering that to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if it costs you $100 or $150, I'm not paying for a good enough service for everybody, but it might be worth $100 or $200 if 8 of your tenants can all not have to pay for it and are willing to pay $25, $50, $70 more a month in rent.
Right. Yep.
And then you want to consider how you want to deal with parking. So especially in urban areas, parking is at a premium. And Seattle, we got rules for everything, and parking has to be financially separated, contractually separated from the lease. And that doesn't mean you have to pay a charge more for it, but there are opportunities to make money with parking, and it doesn't even have to be people who live at the property. So you can separate your parking spaces and even storage areas from rental units and decide how you want to charge or not charge for that.
Yeah, I think nowadays, especially in dense urban areas, not everybody has cars anymore, or some people might have 2 cars, so there's a way to kind of balance that out to give parking to people who need it and not charge for parking, for people who don't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. And then we're also going to need to consider deposits and fees. So, think about whether you want to get separate deposits for different purposes or use one umbrella security deposit. Meaning, like, do you want a separate deposit for damages, separate deposit for pets, or separate deposit for cleaning, things like that? So generally, we can go through some of these, but I often will just take one general security deposit and then note that there are some requirements in some places about how you handle that security deposit when you get it. Some places will make you put that money into a separate trust account, meaning that money gets put aside so that when the tenant vacates, that money is still there so it can be refunded to them. Like, what they don't want is that money to get commingled and then you spend it, and when the tenant moves out and you say, sorry, there's nothing left. So that's kind of what that's for. But anyway, security deposit is generally a fully refundable that can be used for unpaid rent or fees or repairs, cleaning, other things that when a tenant moves out, if there's things that need to be handled, it can come out of that security deposit. Another type of deposit is a cleaning deposit. So a tenant might prepay a certain amount for having the unit cleaned and move out, so that they can basically move their stuff out and sweep and kind of just get it presentable, but they don't have to do the full on, deep cleaning that they might otherwise have to do or pay for.
Which they never do well anyway.
Exactly. And that's a good way to handle it. If that's a concern of yours, that you feel like, at the end of every tenancy, I have to go through and hire professional cleaners and carpet cleaners and this and that, and I never get compensated for that. Well, then consider charging that cleaning deposit up front and say, okay, I'll take that now. I'm going to set it aside for my use then when you move out, and you don't have to worry about it, and we don't have this conflict.
Right.
Next, pet deposit versus pet fees. Whether you're going to collect a potentially refundable pet deposit, or if you just want to say you're going to just collect a fee and it's not refundable, and I know that I'm going to have to spend a certain amount at the end of the tenancy to get things in order after having a pet that's above and beyond what I normally do. So just go ahead and collect that fee. Another one is application fees. Nowadays, all the kind of screening services that are out there will collect a fee, but oftentimes that tenant just pays directly. It's an easy way to just do it. You send them a link, they sign up, they pay it, and you don't have to worry about collecting fees. You don't have to worry about refunding fees if they don't get accepted, things like that. They just pay that, whether that's Zillow, whether that's any of the other services that do that. And then there's some other types of fees, miscellaneous fees, things like for storage fees or locker fees. If you have those amenities on your property, maybe that's something that you can charge for. Amenities fees, I've seen this in some of the larger, maybe nicer complexes where they might tack on a little bit more because they've got a nice fitness center that you can use or things like that. Also, one thing that I do, there's a lockout or lost key fee. So, if I have a tenant who says, hey, I'm locked out, I can come let them in, but it's going to cost you. Or if they don't want to do that, they can get a locksmith and come let them in as well. So,
yeah,
but definitely things to consider in terms of set those things and make them known and let them know, and they will go in the lease as well.
Yeah.
And then, you're going to have some move-in costs. When a tenant first moves in, what do they have to pay right up front? Usually that's first month's rent, possibly the last month's rent that you collect up front, and then those deposits that we just talked about. That's a good thing to consider, and it can add up. And in some places, there are even rules about how much you can collect in a move-in fee up front, or whether you have to allow them to pay in a kind of prorated basis over the course of several months. So again, all things to consider there.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I do, like Chris mentioned, I do just one balloon, fully refundable security deposit, because it can then be applied to whatever is necessary, cleaning or repairs or nothing at all, if everything's all paid up and good. But if you start having dedicated cleaning fees, and then you can't use those, you can only use those for the purpose that they were set out for.
Right.
And somebody's dog's done a bunch of damage to the floor, you suddenly don't have enough money in the deposit to cover that. So anyway, here, it's basically first and all deposits and fees can't equal more than 2 months rent. And I think that's plenty of money as it is. I used to charge last month up front as well, but I've stopped doing that because it's just so much money to ask of people. So, okay, so those are what we got for you in terms of the most common terms that you want to decide on before you go out and market your property. The things that you're going to need to communicate right up front, so everybody knows what they're getting themselves into, and what then rolls into your lease agreements. So we're always interested to know if you have comments. If you like this episode, please like, share, follow, so you get notified when the next one comes out. We're going to be moving on in our next episode to actually creating the rental advertisement and getting it out there in front of people. So thanks for watching. We'll be back.
Thanks.